Hey you! Ready to dive into something new? Today it's all about Delphinium and how it wants to totally change how we think about student engagement.
And we've got the inside scoop right here.
Right. We're talking marketing hype, research papers, even those how-to guides for teachers, a whole 9 yards.
We'll figure out what Delphinium's all about, see if it lives up to all the hype.
Because, let's be real, the Canvas interface, it's not exactly inspiring.
That's an understatement.
I mean, seriously, some of the comments we found on YouTube? Brutal. Wall of text, soul-crushing grayness. Someone even called it the gray SC of death.
Ouch. But yeah, they're not wrong. Standard Canvas. It's a lot, especially if online learning isn't your thing.
Like, come on, Canvas, you had one job. Make online learning not painful to look at. Anyway, that's where Delphinium says, hold my drink. They're all about rescuing our poor eyeballs with something sleek and modern.
3 minutes. That's their magic number. 3 minutes to transform that digital slog into something you might actually want to use.
Okay, color me intrigued, but is it all just a pretty face?
That's the question, isn't it? And that's where the research comes in. Delphinium is pulling from things like behavioral economics, specifically nudges.
Nudges. Is Delphinium going to, digitally guilt trip students into doing their homework?
Not quite, no. Think of it more like subtle cues, right? Like Delphinium might use a progress bar so students can actually see how far they've come and what's left to do.
I get it. Seeing the finish line keeps you motivated.
Exactly. And it's more than just progress bars. They're using ideas from something called self-regulated learning.
Okay, break that down for me. Self-regulated learning, what is it and why should we care?
So it's all about giving students the tools to manage their own learning, setting goals, seeing their progress, making adjustments as they go along. Delphinium's like the framework for that, making students part of the process instead of just along for the ride.
So less about being told what to do and more about helping them become independent learners.
Exactly. It's about that inner drive, wanting to learn just for the sake of learning, which can be tough online. It's easy to feel disconnected.
And speaking of disconnected, Delphinium wants to tackle that feeling of isolation that can come with online learning. They keep talking about building a social presence.
Makes a huge difference. Think about it. Didn't you learn better when you felt like you were part of a group?
Totally. Study groups, projects, even just hanging out with classmates. You need that social connection. So how does Delphinium bring that online? It's not just about adding a chat room, right?
No, it's way more than that. A big part of it is something they call gamification. Think avatars, leaderboards, the works.
Gamification, okay. Love it, but not every student is driven by competition, right?
You're right. Some students, they might find those elements a bit extra, but Delphinium knows that. One thing that really stuck out in the research, they're big on flexibility.
So teachers can customize. No one's stuck with flashing banners and confetti explosions.
Exactly. Want to tone down the gamified stuff? Go for it. Remove it completely. Totally an option. Teachers can create an environment that works for them and their students.
Now that's what I'm talking about. The right tools for the job, not a one-size-fits-all thing. Did the research talk about how different students respond to all this?
Oh yeah, they break students down into different player types. What motivates one student might not work for another. Like they talk about the pragmatist.
Okay, the pragmatist. What do they look like?
Imagine you're in a study group. There's always that one student, right? All business. They want to learn, no distractions, bells and whistles just get in the way.
Just the facts, ma'am, right? So how does Delphinium work for them?
That's where the customization is great. Teachers can streamline things for those students. Clear communication, structured modules, maybe even tone down the competition aspect.
Meeting students where they are. I like it. This brings up another thing. Data. How does Delphinium help teachers use data to personalize the experience?
That's how Delphinium goes from a simple interface to a serious tool. It's not just presenting information, it's collecting data on how students use it.
Like what?
Think of Delphinium as a detective, okay? It sees which modules students spend the most time on, which activities get the most clicks, even how much students are talking to each other and the teacher.
It's figuring out what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, and that's where the control tower comes in.
Control tower, huh? Sounds intense, like some kind of digital surveillance system. Are we talking Big Brother in the classroom?
Not even close. It's more like a central hub. Teachers can see everything happening in their online classroom. One thing the research talked about was how much time teachers waste just trying to keep up with everything.
Oh, I remember those days. Spreadsheets for days trying to figure out who was struggling and who was acing everything. There's got to be a better way.
Well, Delphinium thinks they found it. The control tower takes all that data we talked about, right, and makes it actually useful.
Mhm.
Like, you can see instantly which students might be having trouble.
Okay, that would have been a lifesaver. No more waiting for midterms to realize someone was totally lost. Does it, like, send out an alert if a student misses an assignment or fails a quiz?
It's smarter than that. It looks for patterns. So it might notice if a student's always logging in late or never posts in discussions, or if their quiz scores start dropping.
So teachers can step in early, offer help, or even just check in and see what's up.
Exactly. Being proactive instead of waiting till there's a problem. And get this, Delphinium doesn't just flag struggling students, it helps teachers talk to them and their parents too.
Parents, too. Now, that's impressive. We've all been there, right? The endless emails, trying to connect with parents who are crazy busy. How does Delphinium help with that?
So teachers can send messages right through the platform. Progress reports, reminders, you name it. And it can even automate some of those routine emails teachers send every week.
Less time on email, more time actually teaching. But the big question is, does Delphinium actually work? Can it really change online learning for the better?
That's what we wanted to find out, right?
Yeah.
And I think the answer is maybe, but with a lot of potential. It definitely tackles some of the biggest problems with online learning. Keeping students engaged, making them feel connected, and honestly, just making the whole thing less overwhelming for teachers.
It's like give a teacher a better LMS, and you might just spark a love of learning in a whole bunch of students.
Love that. Which brings us to something for you to think about as you learn more about Delphinium. Technology is only as good as how we use it. So as you check out their tutorials, ask yourself, how can we use Delphinium to create a truly amazing learning experience for every student?
Now, that's a question worth asking. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder that. Until next time, happy learning, everyone. All right, so student engagement. It's the holy grail, right? Especially in the online world. We all want our students to be excited about learning, not just trying to get by. And that's where this deep dive gets really interesting. We're exploring Delphinium, and they are making some pretty bold claims about transforming Canvas. And you, my friend, you want to know if it lives up to the hype. Can Delphinium really boost engagement, help students succeed, and maybe even make learning, dare I say, fun again? We've got a ton of Delphinium intel to unpack: internal documents, marketing materials, research, even testimonials. So let's dive in.
Well, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's start with what we know. Canvas. It's kind of the go-to learning platform, right? It's everywhere. But engaging. I don't know if that's the first word that comes to mind.
Yeah, functional, for sure, but not exactly winning any design awards.
Exactly. And the thing is, that blandness, it can actually have real consequences. There's research showing that a lackluster online environment can impact student performance, which is a major concern.
Especially given the learning loss we've seen since the pandemic, it's a big deal. So where does Delphinium fit into all of this?
Well, they want to be the solution to Canvas boredom. Their big idea is a complete visual overhaul plus some strategic gamification. They say it'll make the whole Canvas experience more engaging, all in just 3 minutes.
3 minutes to revamp a canvas, huh? Okay, you've got my attention. Tell me more about this makeover.
Okay, so imagine this. Instead of that wall of text you're used to seeing, you get this clean, visually organized layout. Think color-coded modules, progress bars that actually make sense, and instant insights into how students are doing.
No more endless scrolling for teachers or students. I like the sound of that already.
Right. It's all about making the experience more intuitive and less overwhelming.
Definitely. Anything to make it easier to navigate the digital learning world and track progress, that's a huge plus. But let's talk about this gamification piece for a second, because it can be hit or miss. What makes Delphinium's approach different?
Oh, you're right to be cautious about that. Just slapping on some badges and calling it a day, that won't cut it.
It feels gimmicky. Students see right through that.
Exactly. And what's interesting is Delphinium seems to get that. They're not just throwing in random game elements. They're thinking about the psychology behind motivation.
So they're being strategic about it.
Yes. So, for instance, they use things like avatars, leaderboards, even these little prize boxes that pop up with rewards. But they've really thought about different learning styles and how to appeal to them. Like one of the prize boxes has this T-Rex animation. Just a little touch of humor, you know?
I see. So it's about adding some personality, making it feel less like a chore.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I'm starting to see the potential here. But we've got to talk about the teacher experience too, right? I mean, student engagement is fantastic, but teachers need support as well. What does Delphinium offer them?
Well, they have this feature called the control tower. And it's all about giving teachers superpowers when it comes to managing their classrooms efficiently.
Superpowers, huh? Sounds intriguing. Tell me more about these superpowers.
Well, it's less about capes and more about, just making things easier. The control tower gives teachers this really clear, color-coded view of their gradebook, so they can quickly see which students might be struggling.
Ah, so no more hunting through spreadsheets trying to figure out who needs extra help. I like it. What else can teachers do with this control tower?
They can actually communicate with students and parents right there through the platform. And get this, they can personalize those messages and even automate them. Imagine sending a quick check-in email to all the students who missed an assignment, just like that, with a few clicks.
Now that's what I'm talking about. That kind of streamlined communication, that's huge, especially for teachers who are juggling multiple classes. It can be a real game changer. As someone who's passionate about this whole student engagement thing, you've probably seen firsthand how much time management or lack thereof can impact a teacher's ability to really connect with their students.
Oh, absolutely. Freeing up that time, it allows teachers to focus on what matters most, which is teaching and supporting their students.
Working smarter, not harder. Okay, so we've talked about the visual appeal, the gamification, the streamlined communication. But do they have the results to back it up?
Well, Delphinium certainly seems to think so. They've got this case study, the Davis Connect case study, and they're saying they found a 31% decrease in student failures after implementing Delphinium.
Wow, 31%. That's pretty significant. What else did they find?
They highlight a lot of positive feedback from teachers raving about how much more engaged their students are, how much better the communication is with parents, and, of course, everyone loves the time-saving benefits.
Okay, so they've got some compelling anecdotal evidence for sure. But it would be great to see some independent research backing up those claims, wouldn't it?
Definitely. More research is always a good thing. It would really help give us a clearer picture of how effective Delphinium is, especially across different types of schools and classrooms.
Right. It's always good to be a little skeptical, right? But what I find really interesting here is how Delphinium seems to be approaching this whole challenge holistically. They're not just focused on one aspect of student engagement. They're trying to create a more engaging learning ecosystem.
Exactly. They're thinking about the visual experience, the motivational aspect, the teacher's workflow, even the parent-teacher connection. It's like they understand that all these pieces, they're all interconnected.
Right. It's about recognizing that students aren't just brains in jars showing up to class as blank slates. They've got lives, families, passions outside of school, and all of that comes into play in the virtual classroom too.
Absolutely. And those outside factors, they play a huge role in a student's learning journey. If a student is dealing with stress at home, or if they're feeling disconnected from their peers, that's going to impact their ability to learn, no matter how engaging the online platform is.
It's all connected. So how does Delphinium address those individual needs? Because let's be real, not every student is going to be motivated by a progress bar or a virtual prize box.
Right, and that's where customization comes in. Yeah. Delphinium really emphasizes that teachers can tailor the platform to their specific classroom needs.
Okay, so give me an example. How does that work in practice?
For instance, teachers have control over all those gamification elements we were talking about. They can adjust point values, create custom badges, or even disable certain features if they're not a good fit. If a teacher doesn't like the idea of a leaderboard, they can just turn it off.
Oh, I like that. It gives teachers the autonomy to create a learning environment that really aligns with their teaching style and the needs of their students.
Exactly. And that's something we see a lot in their marketing materials, this idea of give Canvas a makeover. We're really pushing this idea that with just a few clicks, teachers can transform their Canvas experience.
3 minutes to a whole new canvas, huh? That's a bold claim. But does it live up to the hype? We'll dig into that and more when we return for the final part of our Delphinium deep dive. Stay tuned.
All right, so we're back. And before the break, we were talking all about Delphinium, giving Canvas a makeover. We talked about customization, how Delphinium lets teachers tailor the platform. But, let's zoom back in on this whole gamification thing for a second.
Yeah.
Because, as we all know, it's not as simple as just like adding points and badges and calling it a day.
No, absolutely not. The real magic, it happens when you tap into what really motivates students at their core.
Okay.
Their intrinsic motivation.
Yes. Intrinsic motivation, that inner drive, that desire to learn and grow for the sake of it, not just for a grade or a reward. Exactly. I mean, think about it. You don't learn a new language just to get a certificate at the end, right?
Yeah.
You do it because you're driven by this desire to connect with another culture or expand your horizons or something like that.
Yeah, the joy of discovery. So how does Delphinium tap into that?
Well, they focus on two key things: progress and personalization.
Okay.
So imagine a student. They're working through a challenging course. They're putting in the effort, but it's easy to get discouraged, you know?
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
Right. Now imagine that same student using Delphinium. They've got this personalized dashboard, and it's got these color-coded progress bars that visually show them how far they've come.
Okay.
Each assignment they complete, boom, it moves them closer to 100%. It's visual, it's immediate, and it reinforces that feeling of, hey, I'm making progress, I can do this.
I see. So it's like you're gamifying the feeling of accomplishment itself in a
Yeah.
way.
Exactly. And that sense of progress, it can be so motivating, especially for students who might otherwise struggle to stay engaged.
Right, because they can literally see how far they've come, even if they're not at the finish line yet. It's about celebrating those small wins along the way.
Yes, exactly. And because teachers can customize those elements, they can make sure that they're aligned with the specific needs and goals of their students.
Right, meeting students where they are, providing that personalized support. And, as we've discussed, that's what really truly makes a difference in education.
Oh, absolutely. And, it's refreshing to see a company like Delphinium emphasizing that collaborative spirit as well.
Mhm.
They're not positioning themselves as like the saviors of education.
Right,
They want to be partners working alongside teachers and schools.
which is so important. Technology should empower educators, not try to replace them.
Exactly. And from what we've seen, Delphinium seems to understand that.
Yeah.
They're providing the tools, but they're letting teachers make them their own. Customize the experience for their classroom,
Right.
make it work for them.
It's about recognizing that the human element, that connection between a teacher and their students, that's always going to be at the heart of a truly engaging and effective learning experience.
I think so too. Yeah,
So it sounds like Delphinium is on the right track, wouldn't you say?
I think so. They're asking the right questions. They're definitely trying to address a real need in the world of online learning.
More research is always a good thing, but yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic.
I am too. It's exciting to see this kind of innovation happening, and I'm curious to see where they go from here. And for you, our listener, we hope this deep dive has given you a lot to think about. As you navigate the world of online learning, whether you're a teacher, an administrator, even a student, keep asking those tough questions. Explore new possibilities. Don't be afraid to experiment, because who knows, you might just stumble upon the next big thing that transforms the way we learn and grow. Until next time, happy learning. Online learning. It's kind of like the wild west of education, right? Full of opportunity, but also a few tumbleweeds blowing around.
Mm-hmm.
Today's deep dive is all about making online learning more engaging, more successful, less, tumbleweedy.
Right, because those completion rates, they could be better.
Understatement of the year.
Yeah.
So we're digging into Delphinium. It's this tool that claims to make online classes feel less like a chore and more like, dare I say it, fun.
It's a fascinating approach, really. We're talking behavioral science, a bit of psychology, sprinkled with some, dare I say, gamification.
You had me at gamification.
Yeah.
But before we get to the fun stuff, let's lay the groundwork.
Absolutely.
Why does online learning need a makeover in the first place?
Well, picture this. You're a student, staring at a screen, maybe still in your pajamas.
Been there.
Right. No bustling campus, no study buddies, just you and a digital mountain of assignments.
It's basically the perfect recipe for procrastination.
Exactly. And Delphinium, it tries to address that, not by making the material easier, but by influencing how students engage with the learning process itself.
So less about changing the content, more about changing the vibe.
Yes, and there's a term researchers use for this: educational influence.
Educational influence.
It's about the factors beyond the actual course material that affect how well students learn.
Okay, I'm listening.
So think about it. You can provide all the best textbooks, the most brilliant lectures, but if the student isn't motivated or if they feel lost, it's not going to stick.
Makes sense. It's like you can lead a student to water, but you can't make them, write the essay.
Precisely. And one of the biggest things Delphinium focuses on is this concept of social presence.
Social presence. Isn't that kind of the opposite of online learning?
You'd think so, right? But it's crucial. We're social creatures, even the introverts among us. And when that social interaction is missing, it impacts our motivation.
Oh, for sure. Like even just knowing someone else is struggling through the same material, It can be weirdly motivating.
Exactly. Misery loves company, right? But in all seriousness, that feeling of belonging, of being part of a learning community, it's powerful.
Okay, so how does Delphinium, how does it bring people together when everyone's, miles apart?
That's where things get really interesting, and we'll dive into the specifics in just a bit.
All right, tease. But before we do, you mentioned something about self-regulated learning, too. What's that all about?
Right. So alongside that social element, Delphinium also gives students tools to take charge of their own learning. Because, let's be honest, a big part of those dismal completion rates, it comes down to students feeling overwhelmed, right?
Oh, 100%. Like, where do I even start?
Exactly. And that's where self-regulated learning comes in. Setting goals, managing time, staying organized. Delphinium bakes those elements right into the platform.
So it's like a virtual study buddy, keeping you on track.
In a way, yes. And it can have a real impact. We came across this statistic during our research, and it's pretty eye-opening. People without a college degree, they earn, on average, $1 million less over their lifetime.
$1 million. Wow.
It really puts things in perspective, doesn't it?
It does. Suddenly, those late-night study sessions don't seem so bad. Okay, $1 million.
Yeah.
You definitely have my attention now. But let's get specific. How does Delphinium actually work? What do students see when they log in?
So it's not a whole separate thing, it actually integrates right into the existing learning platforms like Canvas.
Okay.
But, and this is key, it takes that, remember we talked about the sea of gray?
Oh, yeah, the digital void.
Right. Delphinium, it makes it, well, less void-like, more visual. For example, instead of just endless text, they have these progress trackers.
Oh, cool.
And they're color-coded, so green, you're good. Yellow, maybe take another look. And red, well, red means maybe revisit those assignments.
So it's like a constant progress report, but more fun than a spreadsheet.
Exactly. And then remember gamification. They let students create avatars.
Oh, like little digital versions of themselves.
Yeah, and it taps into that desire for self-expression, right? And it can even make those online discussions less intimidating.
That's a good point. I never thought about it like that.
Because if you're a little shy, hiding behind an avatar, it can help.
So avatars, check. What other gamification magic does Delphinium have?
All right, picture this. Prize boxes. Like, remember those cereal boxes with the prize at the bottom?
Oh, yeah.
It's like that, but digital. Students earn them by completing assignments.
It's like a little dopamine hit, but for learning.
Exactly. And if you're into, a little friendly competition, they have leaderboards.
Ooh, leaderboards.
But, and this is important, they use aliases. So, no public shaming for those of us who might be at the bottom of the leaderboard.
Phew. That's a relief.
Yeah.
I always end up at the bottom of the leaderboard.
Right. But it's all about that motivation, right? And to keep everything organized, they have, what do they call them? Progress trackers.
So no more forgetting about that one tiny assignment and then bam, it's like a 0 in the grade book.
Exactly. It's all right there. Clear roadmap.
This is all amazing for students, but I imagine from a teacher's perspective, managing all of this, it's got to be a lot.
And Delphinium, they thought of that too. They have this thing called, are you ready for it? The control tower.
The control tower. Okay, that sounds intense. Tell me more.
So basically, it's a central hub. Teachers can see how everyone's doing at a glance, who's excelling, who might be struggling, the whole picture.
Okay, so it's like air traffic control, but for learning.
Exactly. And, communication, it's key in online learning, right? We talked about that. And Delphinium, they have this whole system of automated messaging.
Really? So even with like hundreds of students, teachers can still be, present.
Right. And it's not about, replacing that personal touch, but it's about working smarter, right? So they have these like customizable templates, welcome messages, assignment reminders, that kind of thing.
So teachers aren't spending hours like crafting individual emails.
Exactly. And they can even set it up to like celebrate student successes, automatically.
Oh, that's nice. Like a virtual high five.
Exactly. And, we talked about data, right? Well, the control tower, it's not just about seeing what's happening. It's about understanding it.
So like not just who's falling behind, but why.
You got it. They can see like, are students struggling with a particular assignment? Or like, when does engagement tend to drop off?
That's really useful. Okay, this all sounds amazing, but in the real world, does it actually work?
That's the question, right? But The research is, it's promising. There was this study by Davis Connect. They're a network of online schools, and they found, get this, a 31% decrease in their failure rate after using Delphinium.
31%, that's huge. What were they doing that was so effective?
Well, it was a pretty big study, 72 classes, over 6,000 students, and I think it was a combination of things, the gamification, the personalized feedback, that increased communication.
Wow, that's impressive. We've talked a lot about, the tech and the science, but I'm curious about the human side of things. Like, were there any stories from teachers or students that really stood out?
Oh, absolutely. We found a lot of teachers who, at first, they were, a little skeptical.
Understandably.
Right. But then they're like Delphinium converts, One teacher even said it like transformed their classroom, turned it into an actual community.
That's sweet. I imagine for some students, just knowing that their teacher, sees them, that can make all the difference.
Definitely. And it's not just about, the students either. Teachers, they felt like they had more time, to actually teach.
That's a win-win. This has been a really fascinating deep dive. Delphinium, it's using some pretty clever tricks to tackle a really big challenge. But it makes me wonder, what if we could apply this kind of thinking beyond online learning?
Right. Like what about workplaces or healthcare or even just, our own personal goals?
Imagine if we could make, like, going to the gym or learning a new language, if you could make it feel less like a chore, more like a game.
Right.
Delphinium, they might be onto something really big here. So listeners, next time you find yourself struggling through an online class or, just need a little motivation boost, remember Delphinium. It's proof that even in the digital world, a little bit of fun can go a long way.
All right, so we're diving into Delphinium this time. Lots to unpack here. Research papers, marketing stuff, even testimonials. Seems like it's making a splash. What's the deal? More than just another app.
Well, what's interesting is they're not reinventing the wheel, not about replacing teachers or anything drastic.
Right, more like taking what's already out there, like Canvas courses, and making them, more human.
Absolutely. Trying to make online learning as good as being in a classroom, which is a challenge, especially with everything else going on in students' lives these days.
Yeah, one paper mentioned how much harder it is for low-income students to finish online courses. The dropout rates are wild.
Huge problem. And Delphinium's tackling a piece of that puzzle that often gets missed. Motivation. Can't just be good content. Got to make them want to learn.
Makes you wonder if we've gone overboard with tech in the classroom, hoping it'd solve everything. But a bored kid staring at a screen is still bored no matter how fancy the software is.
It's that human element they're trying to figure out. How to actually motivate students. Refreshing, really.
Okay, enough teasing. What's the secret sauce? How's Delphinium actually work?
They're pulling from a few places. Big one is behavioral economics. Nudge theory. Using little nudges to guide students in the right direction.
Nudge theory? Sounds a little manipulative, no? How's that work in a classroom?
Think of it like those signs in workplaces. Your coworkers wash their hands. It's not forcing anyone, but it's a nudge. Delphinium uses similar things. Subtle reminders, showing progress, positive feedback, encourages good habits.
Okay, so how's that look in practice?
They've got that great comparison in their materials. The typical Canvas setup, they call it the wall of text versus Delphinium.
Oh yeah, that before picture was brutal. I felt my attention span shrinking just looking at it.
And that's the point. It's overwhelming. So Delphinium makes it visually engaging. Color-coded progress, key info's easy to find. You know where you are, where you've been, where you're going.
Like a roadmap for the course. Way better than those syllabus PDFs we all pretend to read.
Exactly. Big picture's clear, but it's broken down into manageable steps. Even a little countdown timer for the course keeps you on track.
Clever. So much psychology goes into making something actually motivating.
That's just the start. Then they add in the gamification.
Ah, the gamification debate. Hit or miss, depending on who you ask. Where does Delphinium fall on that?
They're aware of that. So yeah, you've got avatars, leaderboards, prize boxes even. But teachers can customize it all. Turn things on or off.
So it's flexible, not forcing one style on everyone.
Right. What works for one student might not work for another. Some love competition, others want to collaborate, some just want to get it done.
I have to admit that T-Rex prize box in the Davis Connect study made me laugh. The students apparently love it.
A little bit of fun goes a long way.
Seems like they're tapping into that love of learning, rather than just grades, making it enjoyable.
Exactly. Rediscovering the joy of learning, even online. And speaking of which,
What about the teachers, though? Even with all the bells and whistles, online teaching can be lonely, right? For everyone involved. You miss that connection.
big time. And that's where this control tower thing comes in. It's like a dashboard for the teacher. You see everything, who's doing well, who's struggling, all of it.
Like those fancy analytics dashboards, but for students.
Exactly. But here's the cool part. Teachers can use that info to send messages, like right there on the platform. See someone falling behind, send a quick message, offer help.
Can't really do that with most systems, can you? Just mass emails that maybe get ignored.
And those don't exactly scream personal touch. Delphinium lets you tailor it. Address concerns, celebrate wins, even just check in.
Huge, especially for younger kids or those who need a little extra help. It's like a virtual lifeline.
Not to mention the time saving. Schedule emails, set reminders, use templates. No more late night grading than another hour writing emails.
It's like they're saying, hey, we'll handle the boring stuff. You focus on actually teaching.
Exactly. Be present, be responsive, that's what matters.
So philosophy, design, gamification, teacher tools, it all sounds great. But the real test, does it work? Does Delphinium deliver?
That's where the data gets interesting. They've got this case study from Davis Connect, a fully online school.
So no chance of in-person stuff skewing the results then?
Exactly. They used Delphinium in 72 classes, over 6,000 students, and get this, failure rates dropped 31% compared to the year before.
31%, that's huge. Anything with that kind of impact is worth a closer look.
It wasn't just grades. More engagement, more on-time work. Everyone felt more connected.
Living up to the hype then. More engaging, more effective, more human. Speaking of which, you mentioned player types. What's that all about?
Right. So even with customization, they realize one size doesn't fit all for motivation. They've got these 4 main player types, each driven by different things.
Okay, I'm listening. Who are these players? What makes them tick?
First up, achievers. Pretty self-explanatory. Driven by achievement, love competition, racking up points, topping the leaderboard.
So like the Khan Academy crowd. Badges and mastery points.
Exactly. Love goals and seeing progress. Then there's the socializers, all about connection. They love avatars, seeing their friends' progress, feeling part of a group.
Ah, the ones who make group projects a social event. Gotcha.
Then the pragmatists. Efficiency is key. They like the clear structure, the progress bars, the user-friendly design. Just want to get things done.
Work smarter, not harder. I get it. Who's left?
The explorers. Curiosity's their jam. Love learning for learning's sake. They'll check out every resource, explore different paths, dive deep into what interests them.
The ones who remind us it's not just about checking boxes, but discovery. So how do they handle all these different types? Different versions of Delphinium? That'd be a lot to manage. 4 different Delphidums.
No, that's not what they're saying. More like, understand the different styles, use the flexibility to reach as many students as possible.
So like, hey teachers, you already know everyone's different. Here are some tools to help with that.
Right, like leaderboards. Great for those achievers. But some kids, they might freak out. So Delphinium lets you put it front and center or hide it away, depending on the class.
Teachers are practically learning experience designers now, thinking about engagement and all that.
Exactly. It's about teaching humans, not just content. And humans are complicated. Everyone learns differently.
Makes you think, if we can figure this out, especially online, could something like Delphinium make education fairer? For everyone?
Big question. And they care about that, for sure.
Yeah.
Don't have all the answers. But trying to level the playing field, make online learning work for everyone.
Especially for students who might not have a ton of support at home or they're juggling jobs, all that.
Exactly. Structure, communication, support, Delphinium could help with that. Keep those students from falling through the cracks.
So it's not about replacing teachers, right? That's important.
Not at all. They're very clear about that. It's about helping teachers be better.
We'll handle the robots, you handle the humans, something like that.
Exactly. Mentoring, support, building a community, that's human stuff.
And Delphinium's giving them the time and the tools to do it, even online. This has been fascinating. What surprised you the most about Delphinium?
I'd say how well they combine the tech stuff with actual psychology. It's not just flashy, there's thought behind it. Helps everyone, students and teachers.
For me, it's realizing that motivation isn't this big mystery. We can actually design for it, make kids want to learn, not just have to.
Exactly. Spark that curiosity and give them the tools to run with it.
Makes you wonder what education will look like down the road if online learning can be this good. Something to think about. Thanks for the deep dive. This was great.
Okay, so ready to dive in. Today we're all about Delphinium, that educational tech everyone's talking about, and I know you're curious about what it actually does. We've got our hands on some juicy stuff. Internal documents from Delphinium, some research proposals they put together, even testimonials from teachers and students.
Yeah, a real mix of perspectives, which is what we like. It's one thing to have the developer's vision, but it's the real-world feedback that tells us if it's living up to the hype.
Exactly. We've all been there, staring at a blank Canvas page, wishing for something more engaging. And that's what Delphinium promises.
But is it just a fancy reskin for Canvas, or is there more to it? Oh, it's definitely more than a fresh coat of paint. Remember you were saying how frustrating those low completion rates are with some online courses? Well, Delphinium's creators, they saw that as a huge problem. Their research really dug into what makes students tick in digital spaces, and that's where things like social presence and even ideas from behavioral economics come into play.
Let's unpack those, starting with social presence. We know online learning can feel isolating. How does Delphinium change that?
Think about what makes a good in-person class. The energy, the rapport with the teacher, feeding off classmates. Delphinium tries to bottle that up and bring it online, making students feel like they're part of a class, not just a username submitting work into the void.
Okay, but how? What's the magic formula?
It's a bunch of things working together, really. Students get to customize avatars, they can see how they stack up on leaderboards, even see how their progress compares to their peers, and it's all happening in real time.
So it's tapping into those satisfying game mechanics, but for education. Makes you wonder, though, what about the teachers? Are they on board with this whole gamified learning thing?
A lot of them, yeah, they're really enthusiastic about it. They see how it hooks students in. But it's not just about making it fun in games. Delphinium also uses these things called nudges, subtle cues based on behavioral economics to encourage certain actions.
Like those progress bars in video games, always urging you to get to that next level.
Exactly. And Delphinium uses similar tricks to keep students motivated. It's not about forcing them, more like gently nudging them toward success by making the process itself more, rewarding and engaging.
So it's not about bribing students to learn, but rather about making the learning process itself more rewarding and engaging.
You got it. And that ties into the third piece of the puzzle here, self-regulated learning. Think of it as giving students the tools to manage their own learning journey instead of just passively absorbing information.
So instead of just handing them a map, Delphinium teaches them how to read it for themselves.
That's it. Goal setting, tracking progress, reflecting on their performance, it's all right there, visual and easy to understand. They each have this personalized dashboard for their learning, and that can be really empowering.
Instead of digging through endless modules just to find their grades, it's all laid out in a way that encourages them to take charge. But look, let's address the elephant in the room. This whole idea of gamification in education. Some people are wary of it, saying it cheapens the learning experience, that it's a distraction.
Oh, absolutely. Those are valid concerns. And Delphinium's creators, they know there's a fine line between engagement and manipulation. Their stance is that Delphinium should be a tool that supports good teaching, not replaces it. It's about finding that sweet spot where those external motivators, like points or badges, actually enhance, not hinder, a student's own desire to learn.
So it's not just a matter of slapping on some badges and leaderboards and calling it a day. It needs to be implemented thoughtfully, right? Teachers need the knowledge and the right tools to use this tech effectively, ethically.
100%. And that's something Delphinium's creators seem really aware of. They're big on providing training and resources for teachers, really stressing the importance of good teaching practices, and of course, student well-being.
You know, this reminds me of something from the research. One of the big criticisms of online learning is the lack of teacher presence, that feeling of isolation. Does Delphinium address that at all?
For sure. Actually, one of the things teachers rave about most are Delphinium's communication features. It makes it so easy to send personalized messages, a quick check-in, some words of encouragement, or even really targeted updates for students who might be struggling. And the best part, they can schedule these messages in advance or even set them to go out based on certain triggers, like if a student submits an assignment or their grade dips below a certain point.
So it's like having a personal assistant for communication. But with all these bells and whistles, do we have proof Delphinium actually works? Does it really move the needle on student success?
Well, the numbers are pretty convincing. Several studies have shown a significant drop in failure rates in courses using Delphinium. One study at a place called Davis Connect looked at 72 classes and over 6,000 students, and they saw failure rates go down by 31%. And get this, another study focusing on sociology courses saw a whopping 68% reduction.
Wow, those are impressive results. But could those reductions be due to other factors besides delphinium?
That's the thing with these studies, right? They compared courses with delphinium to those without, and while they tried to control for things like the course design and the instructor, it's tough to completely isolate delphinium's impact.
Fair enough. But a reduction that big, even with those caveats, suggests delphinium is doing something right.
But are we just talking about better grades? Or are there other signs of success?
That's the thing. It's not just about the grades. We have all those student testimonials you mentioned. So many of them talk about feeling more motivated, more engaged with the material. Some even said they enjoyed their courses more.
Okay, you've got me convinced I'm feeling a little more enthused about homework after hearing all of this. But it's not just about getting students jazzed about schoolwork, right? There has to be a deeper educational philosophy driving this.
You're spot on. Delphinium's creators are adamant that they're not trying to gamify education, turning it all into a game show. They're trying to tap into that inherent desire we all have to learn and grow, intrinsic motivation. How does that translate into how delphinium is actually designed and used in classrooms?
It's all about giving students the tools of support they need to take the reins of their learning, to feel that sense of accomplishment. Instead of just emphasizing grades, delphinium focuses on progress and effort. Even if a student doesn't get an A, they can still feel good about the work they put in and how far they've come.
So it's about shifting the mindset around online learning, from a chore to something more enjoyable, more engaging, creating a more supportive learning environment for everyone involved. But let's talk accessibility. With any new technology, especially in education, it's got to be accessible to all students, right? Regardless of their background or learning style.
Absolutely. Delphinium's creators have really stressed the importance of universal design principles, making sure the platform is usable by students with a wide range of abilities and disabilities. They've got features like keyboard navigation, alternative text for images, adjustable font sizes, all that good stuff.
That's good to hear, but accessibility goes beyond just the technical stuff, doesn't it? How does delphinium handle all the different ways students learn and their individual needs?
One of the great things about delphinium is its customization. Teachers can really tweak it to match how they teach and what their students need. They can choose which features are activated, how the content is structured, even how they communicate with students. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's a flexible tool that can be molded to different learning environments.
Because what works for one student or one classroom might not work for another.
Exactly, and that's where the human element, the teacher's judgment and expertise, is irreplaceable.
Delphinium isn't about replacing teachers. It's about giving them the power to do what they do best.
Exactly.
Now, we talked earlier about how teachers are raving about the communication features of delphinium. Let's dig into that a bit more. What makes these tools so effective, and how do they contribute to delphinium's overall impact on student success?
Well, one thing that really sets delphinium's communication tools apart is their focus on personalization and automation.
So it's not just about blasting out generic mass emails to the entire class. It's about making messages that feel like they were written for each student.
You got it. Teachers can use delphinium to send messages to specific groups of students based on their progress, their needs, even their learning styles. For example, a teacher could send a quick message of encouragement to students who are falling behind, or a congrats message to those who are excelling. And they can do this all at once, which saves a ton of time.
That's incredibly efficient. But doesn't it risk feeling impersonal if it's automated?
That's where the personalization features shine. Teachers can use these variables to automatically add a student's name, their grades, even specific feedback into a message. So even though it's automated, it still feels personal, like the teacher took the time to reach out individually. And that personal touch can make a world of difference, especially online where students can feel so disconnected.
Absolutely. It's about striking that balance between efficiency and personalization, using technology to enhance, not replace, those vital human connections in learning.
And that's where delphinium really shines. It's not just a piece of software. It's a tool for building relationships and community right within the online classroom.
And speaking of community, let's talk about another aspect of delphinium that aims to build connections, parent involvement.
It's true. One of delphinium's unique features is its ability to bring parents into the loop.
So parents can stay in the know about their child's progress and maybe step in earlier if there's an issue.
Precisely. Teachers can choose what they share with parents. Progress reports, assignment reminders, or even just general updates. And parents can access all this through their own delphinium portal.
That's a game changer. We know parent involvement is so crucial for student success, and Delphinium makes it much easier for parents to stay engaged.
It really does. And it helps create this holistic approach to education where parents, teachers, and students are all working together to support the student's learning journey.
It takes a village, right? But let's be real, not every parent has the time to be glued to a separate portal for updates.
And Delphinium gets that. That's why they offer a few different ways for parents to stay in the loop. They can choose to get email notifications, text message alerts, even push notifications through the Delphinium app. No matter how busy a parent is, they can still stay informed without overhauling their routine.
It's about meeting parents where they are.
Exactly. Making it as easy as possible for them to be involved in their child's education.
And that's something Delphinium seems to excel at, bridging that gap between school and home.
And this is an important point to emphasize. Delphinium isn't just a tool for teachers or students. It's a platform that's designed to facilitate communication and collaboration among everyone involved in a student's education.
It's a good reminder that education isn't a solo mission, but rather a team effort that requires everyone to be on the same page. And speaking of teamwork, let's talk about a question that often pops up with educational technology.
Cost.
The age-old question, how much will this set us back?
Exactly. Educational tech can be pricey, and schools are always working with tight budgets. So where does Delphinium fit into all of this?
Well, they don't publicly share their exact pricing, but they do offer different tiers based on the size of the school or district, and they have discounts for schools that commit to multi-year contracts. So it's not a one-size-fits-all pricing model, which is good news for smaller schools that might not have the same resources as larger ones. It sounds like they're open to working with schools to find a plan that works, which is a good start. But the cost isn't just about the price tag, is it? We also need to think about the return on investment.
You're right. It's about value for money. And this is where Delphinium's laser focus on student success is really important. If it truly helps students succeed, then it's worth serious consideration.
Because if it leads to better outcomes for students, more engagement, lower failure rates, increased motivation, then it becomes a much easier decision.
You got it. And the research we looked at, with the decreased failure rates, the boosted engagement, the improved communication, all of that points to a good potential return on investment. It's not about throwing money at a problem. It's about investing in student success. When you look at it that way, Delphinium starts to look like a pretty smart investment.
And that's something school administrators and decision makers need to keep in mind. This isn't just another expense, it's an investment in their students' futures.
Speaking of the future, let's think big picture for a moment. Delphinium is clearly designed to improve online learning, but do you think it has the potential to impact education more broadly, even beyond the digital world?
That's a really interesting question. I think there are definitely some key takeaways from how Delphinium approaches learning that could be applied to in-person learning too.
Like what?
Well, for starters, there's the emphasis on personalized learning and feedback tailored to each student. Delphinium makes it easy for teachers to customize their instruction to meet the needs of individual students, which is something that can be tricky in a traditional classroom setting.
That's true.
And then there's the focus on student agency and ownership over their learning. Delphinium gives students the power to set goals, track their progress, seek help when they need it. Those are essential skills for lifelong learning, no matter where a student is learning.
Absolutely. By helping students develop these skills early on, Delphinium could be setting them up for success in higher education and even in their careers down the road. It's not just about good grades, it's about equipping them with the skills and the mindset to thrive.
It's a good reminder that technology, when used right, isn't about replacing us, but it's about helping us be better.
And that's an exciting thought as we navigate the ever-changing world of 21st century education.
Now, you mentioned earlier that Delphinium uses some ideas from behavioral economics to motivate students. Can you tell us a little more about how that works in practice? What about the potential downsides, like making students overly reliant on those external motivators?
Right, so you're right. Delphinium does use some elements of reward systems. Take those prize boxes, for example. Those are meant to give students a little burst of positive reinforcement when they complete a task or hit a milestone.
Like a little virtual high five?
Exactly. And while some might say this creates a dependence on those external rewards, Delphinium's creators argue it's about tapping into our natural desire for positive reinforcement. It's about using that strategically to encourage the behaviors we want to see.
So less about bribing students to learn and more about weaving those rewarding elements into the learning process itself.
Exactly. It aligns with how behavioral economics sees things. Our decisions are often swayed by subtle cues and incentives. Like those loyalty cards at coffee shops, they nudge us to buy more coffee just by existing. We're wired to respond to those little nudges.
And Delphinium uses similar tactics, but instead of pushing caffeine, it's all about encouraging students to, well, learn more.
No, that's a nudge I can get behind, but you're right, there's always a risk of going overboard. Too much emphasis on external rewards can backfire. It might actually undermine their intrinsic motivation and create a dependence on those external factors.
So how does Delphinium walk that tightrope? How do they make sure they're not just creating students who are hooked on rewards?
It's a balancing act, and it takes careful thought and implementation. Delphinium's creators are pretty clear that these reward systems should be used strategically and sparingly. They shouldn't be the main driver of learning. It's about hitting that sweet spot where those external motivators enhance, not replace, a student's inherent enjoyment of learning. And that's where the teacher's role is so important. They need to be aware of how they're using these systems and avoid creating a dependence on them.
It's a team effort, as we've been saying. Teachers need the knowledge and the right tools to use this technology well and ethically.
Exactly. And that's something that Delphinium's creators seem to be very cognizant of. They provide extensive training and resources for teachers, emphasizing the importance of pedagogical soundness and student well-being.
So it's not just a matter of throwing some badges and leaderboards at students and calling it a day.
Absolutely not. It requires careful planning and a deep understanding of both the technology and the students who will be using it.
It sounds like Delphinium, while potentially revolutionary, isn't a magic bullet. Its success hinges on how thoughtfully it's implemented and how well it's integrated into a school's existing practices.
That's a very insightful observation. No technology, no matter how groundbreaking, can single-handedly solve all the challenges in education.
But it can equip educators with valuable tools and insights to create a more engaging and effective learning experience for the students. And that's what's so exciting about this conversation.
I agree. Exploring the potential of educational technology like Delphinium reminds us that we're on the brink of a new era of learning, an era where technology and pedagogy can work hand in hand to help every student thrive.
And now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about a specific concern that some folks have raised about Delphinium and its gamified approach. There's been some worry about the potential for increased competition and anxiety among students.
That's a valid concern, for sure. We don't want to create a high-pressure environment where students are constantly comparing themselves to their peers and feeling stressed out about their performance.
Exactly. So, how does Delphinium address this concern?
They've taken a multi-pronged approach to try and mitigate this potential downside. Firstly, they've incorporated features that emphasize individual progress over head-to-head competition. So instead of just focusing on who's in first place, students are encouraged to celebrate their own achievements and milestones.
And the leaderboard, while still there, is designed to avoid unnecessary comparison, right? Like it only shows students their ranking within a small group of peers with similar scores. So it's not about pitting students against each other. It's about fostering a sense of friendly competition within a more manageable group.
Precisely. And to take it a step further, they use aliases on the leaderboard so students have that layer of anonymity, which reduces the pressure to perform.
That's a smart way to protect their privacy and lessen the potential for negative social comparison.
And it speaks to the thoughtfulness that's gone into creating a platform that's both engaging and supportive. It's not just about making things fun, it's about creating a positive and healthy learning environment.
And speaking of understanding how students learn, let's talk about another key aspect of Delphinium's design. Its flexibility and adaptability. You mentioned earlier that teachers can customize the platform to fit their teaching style and their students' needs. Can you give us some concrete examples of how this works in practice?
Absolutely. One of the things that makes Delphinium so versatile is that it seamlessly integrates with a school's existing learning management system, like Canvas. So teachers don't have to learn a whole new platform or migrate their content, which can be a huge relief.
So once Delphinium's up and running, teachers have a lot of control over how it looks and how it works.
Right. They can decide to enable or disable specific features, like the leaderboard, the prize boxes, or even those avatars. If a teacher thinks a particular feature isn't right for their students or their teaching style, they can simply switch it off.
That's handy. But it's not just about toggling features on and off, is it?
Nope. It goes deeper than that. Teachers can even customize how Delphinium looks, like picking color schemes, fonts, even uploading their own images and backgrounds. This level of personalization lets teachers create a learning space that reflects their personality and teaching style, and it helps students feel more connected to their teacher and the material.
It's about ownership and agency for both teachers and students.
Exactly. And it really underscores that Delphinium isn't meant to be a one-size-fits-all solution, but a tool that can adapt to many different educational settings. Because what clicks with one teacher or one classroom might not work for another.
That's true. And that's where the human element, the teacher's expertise and judgment, is so important.
I agree.
Delphinium provides the tools, but ultimately, it's up to the teacher to use those tools effectively and create a positive, engaging learning experience for their students.
And that's how it should be. Technology can complement and support teachers, but it should never aim to replace them.
And speaking of inspiration, how is Delphinium changing the way teachers approach online learning? How is it challenging those old ideas about online education and paving the way for something more engaging, more effective?
One thing Delphinium does really well is challenge that old idea that online learning has to be isolating and impersonal. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that online learning is just about delivering content through a screen, but Delphinium proves it can be so much more than that.
It's true. By emphasizing social presence, clear communication, and a sense of community, Delphinium creates a much more vibrant and connected online learning experience, one where students feel seen, heard, and supported. It's not about simply recreating the physical classroom online. It's about taking advantage of what technology makes possible to create a richer and more engaging experience for everyone.
Absolutely. Delphinium's data analytics features, for instance, give teachers those real-time insights into how their students are progressing and what they're understanding.
So instead of waiting for a student to fall behind, teachers can step in early and prevent those knowledge gaps from becoming bigger problems.
Exactly, and that's just one example of how Delphinium is pushing the boundaries of what we think is possible in a digital classroom. It's an exciting time to be involved in education, especially with tools like this emerging to support both teachers and students.
Speaking of the future, let's talk about what Delphinium's success, or even its failures, might tell us about where educational technology is headed. What are your thoughts on this?
That's a big question. I think if Delphinium continues to gain traction and show those positive results for students, it could signal a broader shift in the edtech world towards more well-rounded, student-centered solutions.
So instead of just focusing on delivering content or testing knowledge, we might see a greater emphasis on tools that support the whole learner, right? Their academic needs, their social and emotional needs.
Precisely, because when it comes to learning, one size doesn't fit all.
That's a good point. And I think Delphinium's success could really pave the way for a more personalized and equitable approach to education overall, which is exciting.
It is.
But let's not get ahead of ourselves. There are still hurdles to overcome and questions to answer.
Like what?
Well, scalability, for one. Delphinium has shown promise in smaller studies, but can it be implemented and, importantly, sustained on a larger scale, like across whole districts or states? Scaling up any educational technology initiative always comes with its own unique set of challenges.
What kind of hurdles do you think Delphinium might face as it grows?
Training and support are always going to be big ones. Teachers need proper training on using Delphinium effectively, and they need that ongoing support to tackle any issues that pop up. And this becomes even more important when we're talking about more diverse groups of students.
I see what you mean. It's not enough to simply hand teachers new software and expect them to just figure it out on their own. They need comprehensive training, resources, and a reliable support system to fully integrate Delphinium into their teaching and tailor it to their students' needs.
Exactly. And that requires a real commitment in terms of time, resources, and personnel, which might not be feasible for every school, especially those that are already stretched thin. And then there's the question of long-term sustainability.
How do we ensure that Delphinium isn't just another passing trend in educational technology? That's the million-dollar question, and I don't think there's a simple answer.
No, but there are definitely things that can help or hinder that long-term sustainability. Buy-in from all the stakeholders is a big one. That means teachers, administrators, parents, even the students themselves.
You're absolutely right. Everyone needs to be on board and invested in Delphinium's success if we want it to last. And that means open communication, a willingness to listen to feedback, and a shared vision for how Delphinium can support a school's goals.
It's not just about bringing in a shiny new piece of tech. It's about nurturing a culture of innovation and collaboration, where everyone feels empowered to use Delphinium to its full potential.
Absolutely.
And that takes time, effort, and a willingness to adapt to new ways of teaching and learning, which is where leadership comes in.
100%. School leaders, they need to champion Delphinium. They need to provide the necessary resources, support, and encouragement for it to really take root. They need to foster an environment where teachers feel comfortable trying new things, taking risks, and sharing what they've learned, both the successes and the failures. That's how real innovation in education happens.
It's a really exciting vision for the future of education, one where technology doesn't get in the way but actually strengthens those human connections that are so crucial for learning.
And it's a vision that Delphinium, with its focus on personalized learning, community, and student agency, has the potential to bring to life.
Now let's talk about data. You mentioned Delphinium's personalized approach to learning. How does data play into that?
That's crucial for any educational technology.
Totally. So how does Delphinium use all this data to personalize the learning experience for each student?
So Delphinium keeps track of things like how often students are completing assignments, how long they're spending on tasks, how they're moving through modules. Then it takes all this data and gives teachers personalized insights into each student's strengths and areas where they might need a little extra help.
It's like having a digital teaching assistant who's always observing and flagging potential issues.
That's a great way to put it. And what's even more impressive is that Delphinium doesn't just give you a bunch of dry statistics. It creates helpful visualizations and presents actionable insights that teachers can actually use to improve their teaching.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. Let's say a teacher notices that a lot of their students are struggling with a certain concept in a module. Delphinium can flag that trend and even suggest some targeted interventions, like giving them extra practice problems or maybe having a quick review session.
That takes the guesswork out of teaching and lets teachers focus their energy where it's needed most.
Exactly. It helps teachers be more proactive and responsive to their students' needs, which can make a world of difference.
But what about the ethical side of collecting all that student data? That's something people are concerned about, and rightfully so.
You're right. That's a really important conversation to have. Delphinium's creators are very clear that student privacy and data security are top priorities. They follow all the relevant privacy regulations, and the data is encrypted and stored securely.
So parents and students can feel confident that their personal information is being handled responsibly.
Absolutely. And Delphinium is very transparent about what data they collect and how they use it, giving users more control over their information.
The transparency and control are so important, especially in education. It's about using technology ethically and responsibly.
I completely agree.
It's about finding that balance between using data to improve learning while still protecting student privacy.
Which is something Delphinium seems to be approaching thoughtfully and carefully.
Now, let's zoom out a bit and talk about the bigger picture of Delphinium's development. You mentioned its creators have been at this for over a decade. What were some of those aha moments that led to Delphinium being created?
One of the big ones was realizing that traditional online learning often misses the mark when it comes to the social and emotional needs of students. It's easy to get bogged down in the technical stuff. How do we deliver content? How do we assess understanding? And forget that learning is a fundamentally human experience.
Exactly. We're social creatures at our core. We crave connection, belonging, support. And that becomes even more important in online settings where it's easy to feel isolated.
Exactly. Delphinium was designed to bridge that gap by making social presence, communication, and community central to the experience.
And another key realization had to be that not all students are motivated in the same way. We all learn differently, we're interested in different things, and we're driven by different factors. Traditional education often misses the mark on that. How does Delphinium tackle this challenge?
It borrows some ideas from behavioral economics and gamification to offer a variety of motivational tools and strategies that can be tailored to each student. So instead of a one-size-fits-all approach to motivation, Delphinium offers something much more nuanced and personalized. And that flexibility and customizability we talked about earlier, that plays a big role here, letting teachers choose the features and strategies that best fit their students.
It's about empowering teachers and students to create a learning experience that's engaging, motivating, and ultimately effective.
Precisely. And that's what makes Delphinium so exciting. It's not just a piece of software. It reflects a deeper understanding of how people learn and how technology can support that.
It's a good reminder that educational technology, at its core, shouldn't be about replacing teachers, but about giving them the tools to be even better at what they do.
Couldn't agree more.
Speaking of empowering teachers, how is Delphinium changing how teachers see their role in online learning? What are some of the ways it's shifting their perspective?
Well, for one, it's freeing up their time. Delphinium automates a lot of those routine tasks that can eat up a teacher's day, like grading, sending out reminders, and keeping tabs on student progress. This frees them up to focus on what they do best, teaching and building relationships with their students.
So it's not just about automating tasks, it's about giving teachers better tools and more information so they can be more effective in their roles.
Exactly. And that, in turn, makes teaching more fulfilling and rewarding. When teachers feel empowered and supported, they can bring their best selves to the classroom, whether that classroom is physical or virtual.
That's a really powerful idea. And it highlights the often overlooked human side of technology in education.
Oh.
Now, we've talked a lot about the potential benefits of Delphinium, but it's important to also consider the challenges and potential downsides. What are some of the hurdles that Delphinium might face, even if it's implemented with the best of intentions?
One of the biggest challenges is ensuring Delphinium is used ethically and responsibly. Like with any powerful tool, there's always the risk of misuse or unintended consequences.
Can you give us some concrete examples of what you mean?
Well, for instance, some critics have raised concerns about the use of gamification in education, arguing that it can be manipulative or create a dependence on external rewards. We touched on this earlier, but it's worth reiterating. It's crucial that teachers use Delphinium's reward systems judiciously and ensure that they're not undermining students' intrinsic motivation.
We discussed this earlier as well, and it's a concern that needs to be taken seriously.
Absolutely. Schools need to have clear policies in place regarding data collection, storage, and use, and they need to be transparent with parents and students about how their information is being handled. It's about striking that balance between leveraging the power of data to improve learning while also protecting students' privacy and autonomy. And that's a balance that requires careful consideration and ongoing dialogue among all stakeholders.
Now, another potential challenge is ensuring that Delphinium is accessible to all students, regardless of their background, learning style, or access to technology. We don't want to create a situation where some students are benefiting from this technology while others are being left behind. So how do we address this challenge?
It starts with ensuring that Delphinium is designed with accessibility in mind.
Can you elaborate on what that means?
Sure, it means incorporating features like keyboard navigation, screen reader compatibility, and adjustable font sizes to make Delphinium usable by students with a range of disabilities. So it's about making sure that Delphinium is usable by everyone, regardless of their physical or cognitive abilities.
Exactly. And it also means providing adequate training and support for teachers who are working with students with special needs. Because teachers need to know how to adapt Delphinium to meet the unique learning needs of their students.
Precisely. And then there's the issue of access to technology. Not all students have reliable internet access or devices at home, which can create a barrier to participating in online learning.
That's a significant challenge, and one that goes beyond Delphinium itself. It highlights the broader issue of digital equity in education. Schools and districts need to address this issue by providing students with the necessary devices and internet access, whether through loaner programs, hotspots, or other initiatives. It's about creating a level playing field so that all students have the opportunity to benefit from technology and education, not just those who are already privileged.
And that's an essential step towards ensuring that Delphinium and other educational technologies can truly fulfill their potential to improve learning for all students. It's also crucial to consider the potential for Delphinium to inadvertently reinforce existing inequalities. If students from more affluent backgrounds have greater access to technology and support at home, they may be better positioned to benefit from Delphinium's features, potentially widening the achievement gap.
That's a sobering thought. So it's not enough to provide access to the technology. We need to ensure that all students have the support they need to use it effectively.
Exactly. Schools need to provide equitable access to resources like tutoring, technical support, and professional development for teachers to ensure that all students can benefit from Delphinium's personalized learning features.
It's about creating a truly equitable learning environment where every student has the opportunity to thrive regardless of their background or circumstances.
Now let's shift our focus to another potential challenge, the integration of Delphinium into existing school systems and curricula. Introducing any new technology requires careful planning, professional development, and ongoing support.
Absolutely. Teachers need to be adequately trained on how to use Delphinium effectively, and they need time to integrate it into their lesson plans and teaching practices.
And it's not just about training individual teachers. It's about systemic change. Schools need to develop clear policies and procedures for using Delphinium, and they need to provide ongoing support and resources for teachers.
It's about creating a culture of innovation and collaboration where teachers feel empowered to experiment with new technologies and share best practices with each other.
And this requires commitment from school leadership, not just in terms of funding, but also in terms of vision and support. Administrators need to be champions for Delphinium, advocating for its use and providing the necessary resources for its successful implementation.
It's about creating a school environment where innovation is valued and supported, where teachers feel encouraged to explore new approaches to teaching and learning.
And that brings us to another crucial factor: ongoing evaluation and refinement. No technology is perfect, and Delphinium will undoubtedly need to be adapted and improved over time.
So it's not a one-and-done solution. It's an ongoing process of learning, adapting, and refining.
Exactly. Schools need to collect data on Delphinium's impact, both in terms of student outcomes and teacher satisfaction, and they need to use this data to make informed decisions about how to improve the platform and its implementation.
It's about creating a feedback loop where data informs practice and practice informs data.
And it's about being open to change and adaptation, recognizing that the best solutions often emerge through a process of trial and error. This highlights the importance of collaboration between schools, researchers, and Delphinium's developers. By working together, they can ensure that Delphinium continues to evolve and meet the changing needs of students and teachers.
Absolutely. It's about creating a partnership where everyone is invested in Delphinium's success and committed to using it to create a more equitable, engaging, and effective learning experience for all students. As we wrap up our deep dive into Delphinium, it's clear that this technology has the potential to be a game changer for online education. But it's not a silver bullet. Its success will depend on several factors, including ethical implementation, thoughtful integration, and commitment to ongoing evaluation and improvement.
And it's important to remember that technology is just a tool. It's the human element, the teachers, the administrators, the parents, and the students that will ultimately determine Delphinium's impact.
The key takeaway is that Delphinium offers a compelling vision for the future of online learning, a future where technology empowers teachers, personalizes learning, and creates a more equitable and engaging experience for all students.
It's a future worth striving for, and Delphinium is showing us the way.
And on that note, we'll leave you with a final thought. As you consider the potential of Delphinium for your school or district, ask yourself, how can we use this technology to improve online learning and transform education as a whole?
It's a question worth pondering as we navigate the ever-evolving landscape of learning in the 21st century.
That's it for our deep dive into Delphinium. We hope you found this episode informative and thought-provoking. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.
Absolutely. Schools need to have clear policies in place regarding data collection, storage, and use, and they need to be upfront with parents and students about how that information is being handled.
We discussed this earlier as well, and it's a concern that needs to be taken seriously. It's about striking that balance between using data to improve learning while also protecting student privacy and autonomy. And that's a balance that requires careful consideration and ongoing dialogue among all stakeholders. It really does come back to that collaborative approach, doesn't it? Not just with something as big as data privacy, but also the practicalities of making sure Delphinium works for everyone. I mean, not every student learns the same way, and not everyone has equal access to technology.
You're hitting on another crucial point. Ensuring Delphinium is accessible to all students, regardless of their background, learning style, or even just their access to tech. We don't want to create a situation where some students are benefiting from this technology while others are being left behind.
Right.
So how do we address that? What are some of the things schools need to be thinking about?
It starts with ensuring that Delphinium itself is designed with accessibility in mind. This means incorporating features like keyboard navigation, screen reader compatibility, and adjustable font sizes. The goal is to make it usable by students with a range of disabilities, making sure it's usable by everyone, regardless of their physical or cognitive abilities.
That makes sense, but that's only part of the equation, right?
Yeah.
What about students who might not have reliable internet access at home or even a computer to work on?
That's a huge challenge, and one that goes beyond just Delphinium. It highlights the broader issue of digital equity in education. Schools and districts need to be proactive in providing students with the necessary devices and internet access, whether through loaner programs, hotspots, or other initiatives. It's about creating a level playing field so that all students have the opportunity to benefit from technology in education, not just those who are already privileged.
It's almost like Delphinium is forcing these bigger conversations to happen, which is no bad thing. But even if we solve those access issues, there's still the question of how Delphinium fits into a school's existing systems and curriculum. Introducing any new technology, especially one as potentially disruptive as this, requires careful planning, professional development for teachers, and ongoing support.
It does. Teachers need to be adequately trained on how to use Delphinium effectively, and they need time to integrate it into their lesson plans and teaching practices. It can't just be another thing on their to-do list.
Exactly. And it's not just about training individual teachers either. It's about creating a culture of innovation and collaboration within the entire school. Schools need to develop clear policies and procedures for using Delphinium, provide ongoing support and resources for teachers, and encourage them to share best practices with each other.
And this requires a commitment from school leadership, not just in terms of funding, but also in terms of vision and support. Administrators need to be champions for Delphinium, advocating for its use and providing the necessary resources for its successful implementation.
It's about creating a school environment where innovation is valued and supported, where teachers feel encouraged to explore new approaches to teaching and learning without fear of failure. But even with the best intentions and support, we have to acknowledge that no technology is perfect. Delphinium will undoubtedly need to be adapted and improved over time based on real-world feedback.
Absolutely. Schools need to be collecting data on Delphinium's impact, both in terms of student outcomes and teacher satisfaction, and they need to use this data to make informed decisions about how to improve the platform and its implementation.
It's about creating that feedback loop where data informs practice and practice informs data.
Exactly. It's about being open to change and adaptation, recognizing that the best solutions often emerge through a process of trial and error. And that's where collaboration between schools, researchers, and Delphinium's developers becomes crucial.
That collaboration is really key, isn't it? It's about creating a partnership where everyone is invested in Delphinium's success and committed to using it to create a more equitable, engaging, and effective learning experience for all students.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Delphinium, it's clear this technology has incredible potential. It's not a magic solution to every challenge in education, but it does offer a compelling vision for the future of online learning, a future where technology empowers teachers, personalizes the learning experience, and creates a more equitable and engaging environment for all students.
It's a future worth striving for, and Delphinium is showing us what's possible.
And on that note, we'll leave our listeners with this thought. As you consider the potential of Delphinium, ask yourself, how can we use this technology not just to improve online learning, but to transform education as a whole?
It's a question worth pondering as we navigate the ever-evolving landscape of learning in the 21st century.
That's it for our deep dive into Delphinium. We hope you found this episode informative and thought-provoking. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.